It's time to do business again, giving you updates from the world of business in 25 minutes. And here's what we prepared for you. In Ghana, they seem to be doing what Nigeria has started. They want to do crude for cities. The U.S. is accusing Kenya and other countries of helping China to evade taxes. And East Africa integration seems to be taking bolder steps. Welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa from the oil space. Prices rose today on lack of progress in diplomatic efforts to resolve the Middle East conflict, though the absence of major oil outages limited has also limited some of those gains. So we see 1.10% up is what we have for Brent, a bit more than what we had earlier today, $89.49. So earlier today we had it at about $88. So we've seen more increase there. Looks like the stalemate is getting even worse. WTI has followed suit, 0.70% up at $82.04 per barrel. And natural gas is on the lower side. It's dropped 2.74% at $2.66. And then moving to metals today, gold prices we see rose on weaker dollar and fading expectations of United States Federal Reserve rate hike next month supported the bullion. So we see that they all came out in the green today. Spot gold 0.38% up $4,454.30 per ounce. Spot silver is also up 0.72%, $65.58. Platinum is up 0.14% at $1,759.40. Palladium is up 0.26%, $1,329 per ounce. And copper more than 1% up right there. And of course, all of it is connected to the United States economy and the expectations around rate hike, and of course, the conversation with Iran. In Ghana, the leader there, John Mahama, has ordered his finance minister, John Jinapor, to map out a strategy to stop its practice of paying dollars for crude oil. The Ghanaian president wants his country's firm, Tema Oil, refinery and the private Central refinery to target about 100,000 barrels per day. Currently, refineries buy local crude with US dollars under the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Refineries sell finished fuel products locally in Ghana cedis. Buying dollars on the open market creates heavy demand and weakens the cedis. So they seem to be towing the way of Nigeria, even though here in Nigeria implementation hasn't gotten as high as a lot of people would have preferred. The International Monetary Fund is expected to visit Uganda in September to continue talks on a new financial support program, as both sides have yet to reach an agreement. The discussions come at a time when Uganda is facing rising debt servicing costs and a weakening fiscal position despite continued strong economic growth. The IMF says more progress is still needed before any deal can be finalized. But exporters say many producers in the region are not yet ready to meet these strict standards. And West Africa supplies around 70% of the world's cocoa, raising concerns that any compliance gap could disrupt shipment to Europe and affect global supply chains. And talking about West Africa meeting up with the guidelines given by the European Union, that's what this is about. The regulation will require cocoa imports to be fully traceable back to individual farms and proven to be produced without contributing to deforestation. And West Africa industry is under that pressure for new European Union anti-deforestation rules, and that's supposed to come into force December 30, 2026. We move to East Africa now. Kenyan businesses are pushing for urgent reforms to unlock the East African community market. And this as they warn that non-tariff barriers, border delays, high logistic costs, fragmented regulations are undermining the region's potential to become a major investment and production hub. A call emerged from the CEO's Trade and Investment Roundtable that was held in Nairobi, where business leaders and policymakers said that East Africa's estimated $400 billion economy presents a significant growth opportunity for Kenyan companies, and it could be a major production hub. And still around the East Africa, freight rates for the transportation of Ukrainian corn to Egypt, they remain under pressure due to the shortage of available tonnage and the Danube. This is obviously from North Africa and Northeast. At the same time, rates for transportation by coasters from Danube ports, that's in Ukraine, after a sharp increase in recent weeks, have begun to stabilize. According to analysts, rates for transportation by coasters from Ukrainian Danube ports to Egypt are currently maintained at previously achieved levels. As of August 14, they reached about $68 to $69 per ton, while at the beginning of August, they were about $60 to $65 per ton. At the same time, freight for transportation of corn from the ports of Great Odessa to Egypt on handy size is about $22 to $23 per ton. Separately, rates for barge transportation continue to grow. The key reason is the critically low water level on the Danube, where significantly reduces the available tonnage and accordingly the choice for charters. Under such conditions, ship owners maintain a strong negotiating position and insist on high freight rates. Well, let's follow up on that statement made by President Donald Trump on Friday, accusing Kenya and other countries of helping China to evade tariffs that has been set by the United States. And to discuss this, we have Professor Olabisi Akingugbe. He's the Purdy Crawford Chair in Business Law. He's also an associate professor at the Schulich School of Law at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada. Prof, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. This statement, should we be worried at this accusation that Kenya and some other African countries are assisting China to evade tariffs?
Thank you, Winnie. Nice to join you. In terms of whether we should be worried or not, I would say there's not a lot of reasons to be worried for the majority of African countries. This particular report that was released last week is titled The Great Transshipment Scam. And what it seeks to do primarily is that the United States commissioned a report to look at goods that were produced primarily in China, but that looked to circumvent the tariff that would have been levied on those goods if they were imported directly from China to the United States. So in Africa, Kenya and Morocco are on the list of the 40 countries that have been primarily found to be in breach of this transshipment scam. For African countries, therefore, there's not a lot of reasons to be worried about this. There are implications that come for it, for sure, which we can talk about.
So, of course, I'd like to talk about those implications. But first of all, I'm just thinking, AGOA has just been renewed, and we know that Kenya is up on the list when it comes to trading with the United States. Do you think this can affect sentiments that could distort the benefits of AGOA?
Oh, certainly, it can have a feeling that may be too generous, that it has happened right now, if one thinks about it in the way the United States' current economic relations are being carried out. Just maybe for the benefit of the audience, thinking about transshipment, what it means is, countries, for example, engage in repackaging, relabeling, minor, changes to the goods. Rules of origin are not declared. And so for African countries to have gotten, a heads up on AGOA now, and this to have happened in the context of Kenya, it does raise a little bit of questions, right, around USC's continued trust in what African states will be doing. You would recall that at the beginning of the second administration, of Trump. Lesotho, amongst other countries, were on the high end of those tariffs, 50%, 35%. They all came down to 15%, 10 to 15%, and with AGOA opening up the trading continuing, this is not a very good news to have come out of the report involving Kenya and Morocco. Of course, there's a lot of it that still has to be checked. Implementation of these kinds of reports relating to transshipment are not very easy to undertake.
So what should these countries be doing now? And if they do nothing, what are some of the possibilities?
Oh, no, I think for Kenya, that has been particularly mentioned, they just have to show that they are not in bed with China in this particular situation. Like I said, they will still have to prove it. And in instances of transshipment where it's been alleged, the much more difficult hurdle to go through is really establishing that that has happened. And so if Kenya can readily come to the US's, bring to the US's attention that they haven't been involved in any of those kind of claims, it helps their case. I mean, for context, Canada has been accused of the same, for example, amongst other countries that are on that list. And so proactively, I would say Kenya should reach out to the US trade authorities and clarify the situation as far as they are concerned.
And if they do nothing, what could happen?
Well, if we go on what we see Trump doing, there might be an escalation of tariffs. In my view, I think it will be more targeted to Kenya than to draw the umbrella across the African countries. We can look at the example of what's recently happening in the context of Canada. There's likely to be, an increased trade tariff for certain goods by 19th August if things are not taken care of. So you could see similar measure being taken against Kenya if they don't proactively reach out to the U.S. in relation to this particular implication that indictment, that has been alleged against them.
Can these African countries survive without the United States?
It's a very interesting question. I think, here we can't pull the entire continent into one umbrella. You would see that the trading that different countries do with the U.S. differ. And so I would say while, we can argue that African countries can survive without trading with the United States, the limited number of countries that do active trading with the United States actually will suffer more if that should be off the table. If you think about, how much garments go from Lesotho to the U.S., South Africa's economy is already in strain because of issues with the United States. Kenya is there, Nigeria has trading with them. So, they have a big market. And I think, shy of arrogance, we should not say that the United States is a market African countries do not need. But certainly not all African countries trade with the U.S. effectively.
Yeah, so I guess Kenya has to do something about this. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Olabisi Akinkugbe, Purdy Crawford Chair in Business Law and Associate Professor at the Julie School of Law at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada. All right, let's head to the markets now and see what the numbers look like at intraday. Can we have the numbers and see what that looks like at intraday? Thank you so much. So for the NGX, we see there's been a recovery, 0.07%. Up for Johannesburg, it's also up almost 0.5% at intraday. Let's see the other parts of the African market, the EGX, that's negative at intraday, and Nairobi closed a positive 0.09%. In the Middle East, we see Dubai is 0.5% in the red, Abu Dhabi is 0.29% in the green, Tadawul is green, and Qatar looks very green, 1.52% up there. And then moving to the United States, we saw that just the Dow Jones is in the red in early trade today, coming off the back of a third consecutive week of gains. Right there, we see it in the negative. S&P and NASDAQ, however, positive in early trade. We'll see what the numbers look like when proper trade opens. In Asia, market is closed. At the close of trade, we saw mixed color for them. The Nikkei is positive, Kospi, as well as Hang Seng. Let's see the other market. And there you have just India. I did not make it to the green spots at the close of trade today. Shanghai is positive 1.141%. Let's look at Europe now. We have Chip joining us to tell us what's going on in the markets. What's the color of the market, Chip? Yeah, I can see you're talking, Chip, but I can't hear you. I think perhaps you need to unmute or something like that.
How about now? Do you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Excellent,
great.
excellent.
Yeah.
I was just saying that markets here have been mixed. They were in the green before, but now they've gone to red, and but they haven't been really much in the green or much in the red. And right now, the stock 600 is flat, but in the red, and the DAX is down 0.1%. So now that, of course, the strong second quarter earnings season is behind Europe, investors are obviously focusing on geopolitical developments and, of course, also on macroeconomic news to provide them with direction. And, of course, analysts are also seeing a divergence when it comes to economic data from Europe and the United States. Here in Europe, economic data remains relatively strong compared to what we are seeing coming in from the United States, with those latest figures from Friday showing that American shoppers spent less last month, which, of course, actually was good news for markets because that eased concerns that the U.S. Fed will raise interest rates.
Yeah, and away from that, I know we talked about the extreme weather last week. And this morning, talking to my colleague in the UK, they're expecting an increase, in some sense, in the price of water because of the drought. And I'm sure you're also feeling it there. I mean, you're in the same zone, I believe.
We cannot stop talking about the weather enough this summer because obviously it seems to be affecting everything. And if we look at the Rhine, it is at low levels such that we're looking at companies south of Kaub, which is the shallowest part of the Rhine River in Germany. Now, the fact that water levels there are so low, it means that the river is essentially split in two, and industry relies on the waterway to, of course, transport goods. And so industry in the south of the river is pretty much cut off from the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And that's the case, of course, for German chemicals giant BASF. It has a plant. Its main plant is in Ludwigshafen, and that is, of course, especially affected. 40% of the traffic to that plant goes via the River Rhine. So, of course, that is a huge impact on that company as well. Now, the situation further north is only slightly better. Barges can travel as far as the Cologne area, where they supply, of course, refineries and chemical plants and transport goods back to Rotterdam. But the water levels are so low that it is only possible for lightly loaded vessels or ships that are built with low water conditions in mind to pass through. So it is a dire situation, especially for transporting goods on the Rhine right now.
Yeah, so is there an alternative route, or is there anything being done, about the Rhine River?
Well, any companies are trying to move their cargo as much as they can to rail and road freight. But that is, of course, an alternative that is limited because, of course, most companies are looking for the same alternatives for their river cargo. And we've also seen some regional policy changes to help industry cope. Now, there are 4 federal states in Western Germany that have lifted the ban on lorries on Sundays on the Autobahn. And there are 3 other German states which are, of course, considering doing the same. And that does include Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, which are, of course, 2 states among the most affected by the ongoing drought. And they are also home to auto industry players, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Bosch. On top of that, of course, we do have a report from a regional paper, Rheinische Post, which says that DB Cargo, which is a subsidiary of German rail operator Deutsche Bahn, is planning to reactivate old freight cars to make up for the gap in river traffic. And DB Cargo could mobilize as many as 900 cars to replace, which could replace around 200 vessels. But this is, of course, this is really early. El Nino is expected to last until the first quarter of next year. So, the situation could worsen.
Oh, that's not good news at all. And, El Nino talking about, there was a report that also warned African countries that we could have a huge loss, because of El Nino. So I don't know what miracle can happen, but we'll stay on the story. Chip, thank you so much for giving us updates on that.
Thanks, Ini.
And just before we head to the crypto space, Inflation numbers are out for Nigeria. Nigeria's headline inflation declined to 15.43% for the month of July. That represents a 0.48 percentage decrease from 15.91. That's what we had in June. So it's a drop 15.43% at the latest figure, of course, contained in the report released by the NBS, the Bureau of Statistics. That showed that headline inflation rate also fell significantly compared to 24.94% in July. That's year on year. And then despite the decline in inflation, the CPI increased to 145.3 points in July, and that's up from 143.0, representing a 2.2% increase during the month. Of course, we'll feast on this tomorrow on Business Morning, especially when you look at food inflation, which is a major one for the inflation basket in Nigeria, for spending of households in Nigeria. We'll look at this, but it's a drop in inflation number. But do remember, this is the first 2 weeks of July. That's this one. We know that later on in July, we did have a bit of increase in the price of global oil, which of course fits into pump prices and transportation and logistics prices back here in Nigeria. But you don't want to miss the conversation that we'll have tomorrow on that. To the crypto space now, starts with headlines of what's making the rounds. The United States Senate is delaying action on that Clarity Act, and this has been going on for a while. One way actually there's some politics going on there. That Clarity Act has been on the table. On Friday, they did another postponement of not talking about it, and it's a major cryptocurrency market structure bill. Lawmakers remain divided over key provisions. The delay is pushing comprehensive crypto regulation further into uncertainty, with lawmakers expected to revisit legislation after the congressional recess. So there you have it, another delay to that Clarity bill in the United States, and they also delay votes on crypto regulations. And then the U.S. regulators are conditionally approving a national trust bank charter for World Liberty Financial. It's a crypto venture linked to the Trump family, if you remember that. The approval allows the firm to expand stablecoin issuance and digital asset custody under federal supervision, although it cannot accept deposit or issue traditional loans. So it's the U.S. making the rounds and in the crypto space. Let's see the number and perhaps what color is crypto today? Yeah, it's green. But I don't think there's a whole lot to be excited about. I think it's just looking at it in 24 hours, comparing it. But it's 63,562.01, 0.88% up. And our lovely Ethereum is still around 1,198, even though it's gained about 1% in the last 24 hours. We have a couple of greens, but it's still down there. Uncertainty is still pushing market sentiment at this time. And, well, I don't want to say, is this spreading or is it following what's going on as a stock market, or is it just on its own? I think that'll be a good conversation. We'll try and have that this week to find out the major drivers of this price that's and the color that we are seeing, you know, in the crypto space. But that's it on Business Incorporated. Thank you so much for being a part. It's a fresh week. We're just starting, so we still have a long way to go, a lot of conversations to hold with you. But remember, you can always go to our YouTube channel for Business Morning and Business Incorporated to check out information we have shared, and that could direct your investment decision one way or the other. But it's not over for me yet. I'll see you tonight. Hopefully the NGX will sustain that green color at the close of trade. I'm Ini John Mekwa. I'll see you then.